Hi everyone, welcome back to the Wonder of Anime podcast. I'm your host Lisa, and this is a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly anime podcast where I talk to people about anime that they love. That's not the intro, but we are sticking with it. And this week I am so excited to have this like a dream guest. Like I've been wanting to invite you on the podcast for years. I was just like, the timing's not right. It'll happen when it happens. But the stars have aligned, and I'm so excited to have on the podcast today Yedoye Travis, which a lot of you may just recognize him from the internet. He is a comedian. He's also a former anime commentator, and you've probably seen his viral videos on like Fooly Cooly. That was like one of the big ones that I remember. And just all, from the zeitgeist, he has been with us for I feel like years now. Like you've just kind of been in the culture, been, making your mark. So thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was years you've been waiting for this.
I actually went to one of your shows and I met you in person, and I was like, oh my, I need to have him on the podcast. And then I was like, one day it'll happen.
Wait, where was this show? What show was that?
It was in Philly in 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Was it at the what is
the
that
laughing laughing place?
Yeah, I'm like, look, I haven't been out there in so long. I know it's right where the Fillmore is. I
Yes,
forget.
that's
Yeah.
where it was. I don't know what
I
it
guess
was called, but it was there.
The punchline.
Yes, I
In
don't know
my
why I said the laughing.
No, in my head it was like was it the improv or was it the like? But yeah, it's the punchline. That's
Yes.
crazy though. That was the
Yes.
last time that that I've been to Philly, I think.
And that was
Uh,
almost 6 years ago. Well, yeah, five
yeah,
years ago in like October. I think it was an October show. I literally was just looking this up.
yeah, that's crazy. That's actually nuts. Well, good to see you again.
Yeah, so nice to have you on here. And I always like to start with the general question almost everybody starts with on an anime podcast. What has been your anime journey? How did you get into anime?
I mean, I guess I got into it like pretty much every other black kid in the '90s, which was through Toonami and specifically Dragon Ball Z. Um, but like I don't know, it was one of those things like I didn't even think of it as a thing that I was getting into. Just everybody liked it. It was just kind of like it didn't feel like a separate thing from the rest of the zeitgeist, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Just like everybody was into it. We had one kid with a printer at school. You would give him a quarter to print out pictures of Dragon Ball Z characters to draw. Um, is that not a thing everybody did? Well, yeah. Um, and yeah, you were just like we were in a Pokemon, we were in a Dragon Ball Z. It was all like very typical run of the mill stuff. And then like I guess once middle school came around, I started reading manga, which is I think that's when it sort of became clear like, oh, this is like a different thing
Hmm.
um, from most of what we're getting in the U.S. Once like I started reading like Naruto and One Piece and all this other stuff.
That's like I have ascended. Like not a normie anymore on Toonami.
Yeah,
Like I'm reading the books.
yeah. I'm at Borders every Friday at the mall when Borders was still a thing.
Oh my
Um,
God, Borders. Yes.
yeah, yeah. I remember I got in trouble one time because of it, because uh, one of their dickhead employees was doing the whole "this is not a library" thing. It was just like I'm a whole child, man. Like, what do you
Please.
expect me to do? I don't have money of my own. You know,
Like, what are we supposed to do?
right? I could take it out of the store. I could just go to the food court or whatever, and now I'm out of your jurisdiction. So what do you want? You still have the book. You still have it for. You want me to give you back the information? You know?
Take it out of your mind and like just restore it to them. No, I feel like Borders. I definitely had gone to Borders. I think in high school, like, and I remember just being there, like, oh my God, I wish I could buy everything, but I can't.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
such a time, but I remember I didn't watch Dragon Ball Z directly, but my cousins did. But I was the Pokemon, Digimon,
Mhm.
Card Captors, like before we knew like it was supposed to be something else, Sailor Moon.
Uh-huh.
So it's like you're of that generation where it's like we had it. We didn't know it was anime. We were just like, "Oh, I like this. Give me more right now." Like this is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. You could argue it was before it really was anime in a sense,
Hmm.
because it wasn't like I don't know, Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, they kind of came as like a separate first wave before anime was even like a broad thing, but like a broad recognized thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
because it was trying to be American cartoons. So it was cut and chopped
yeah,
and screwed to match American cartoons. And it
yeah.
wasn't
I mean,
until a while later we got it as anime.
yeah. I mean, Dragon Ball Z was cut to be a Mexican cartoon, but that's a different story. That is a different story. Maybe the same story. The English dub was cut from the Spanish dub, which is fun. Um,
Yeah. It was
yeah,
good times.
yeah.
I had Crystal Marie on, and we
Oh
talked
yeah.
about anime in Latin America.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. She's a more of an expert on that than I am. So,
No,
if you're
it was
interested, go
good.
listen to her episode.
Yeah. But so you get into anime and you get into manga, and later on in your professional careers, as I mentioned, you used to do video essays on anime. So how did you get into that?
Weirdly enough, at a time in my life where I wasn't watching that much anime, I was like just starting to revisit it, and I had, I do stand up, and I had one joke where I mentioned Dragon Ball Z that I don't even remember, and I definitely don't do anymore. Um, that I want to say Jesse Goldsberry, saw, or saw somewhere. I don't know because I don't remember if they approached me in person or if I got an email, but yeah, I got contacted by folks at Frederator who were like, yeah, we're starting this anime channel, and we want you to audition to be one of the hosts, and then I just did that, and I guess they saw something in me that I did not see in myself, and was doing that for the next what feels like 5 years, but I don't think it was that long. I feel like my whole like
What is
2017
time?
up until now is like it's so blurry.
Hmm.
It's so blurry. But I think this happened in 2017 ish, 2018 maybe. Um, yeah, because we were getting the robot initially, and then Beyond the Bot started right during COVID after because the Frederator channel got shut down because they allegedly did not have enough money. Allegedly. Um, and so we started our own little project in 2019. But that was after a couple years of doing it under somebody else. And so, yeah, yeah, time, I don't know, but that's more or less how it happened.
That is so cool though. Everybody's dream is like to be approached to do something. Like someone saw you somewhere and approached you, and that happened to you.
Yeah, that it was a dream at the time to
Hmm.
be approached. I think now the dream is to like do my own stuff and y'all leave me alone.
Yes.
You know, let me figure out how to make the money on my own, and y'all can enjoy from afar if you must, but please leave me alone.
You know
Give me
what? I
money.
respect it.
Yeah, yeah, give me the money. That's it.
That listen, that's all that we need is the money to
Mhm.
unfortunately do all the creative things. So I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah, yeah. Just don't bother me. I don't
Yeah.
want your little, I don't want your little corporate directives. I don't want your notes. You know, but maybe I'm weird.
No, I think we're all moving in those directions. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that when you got approached, you kind of weren't watching a lot of anime, but when you started working on the projects, did you get like back reinvigorated into anime, or like now have you stalled out? Like where are you now with your anime?
I got reinvigorated at the time, but I still felt a little bit like I was behind. Like I remember I did one interview or like segment on Sci-Fi where they were asking me what anime I was watching, and I said I don't remember what I said, something like I was watching Kill la Kill at the time, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's a little retro." It had been 5 years since it came out. Like, bro, okay, let's relax. retro is a crazy word to use, but like I'm not all the way up to date right now. Um, a- and I think even though I was more enthusiastic at the time, I was definitely still in a place of like I can't be watching these like soap opera length anime, bro. Like everything is so long. Like, and people who really love anime love to be like, "Oh, have you seen like?" They love to hear what you're watching now and be like, "Oh, so episode 897 of One Piece was." I'm like, bro, I didn't say anything about that. I didn't say anything about that. Like, imagine if you mentioned Seinfeld and I'm like, "Oh yeah, so season 3, episode 6 of Friends is like that's not how media consumption works." So that part was overwhelming for me, and still kind of is, which is part of why I like. If I talk to people about anime now, I mostly want to talk about like film, something I can
Hmm.
sit and watch in like an hour and a half, 2 hours, you know. And if you've seen it, you've seen it. If you haven't, you haven't. But like, even if I think even the day that I do catch up on One Piece, I'm not talking to you about it.
No.
I'm not doing it. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to feed that demon.
No, I
You know?
feel like social media has really changed the landscape of like anime consumption. And it's funny coming from someone who's like the wonder of anime, right? Like I talk about
Yeah.
anime, but I find, and the reason like I set up the format for this show, it's like everything feels like a completist, like a competition. Like you have to be on the
Yeah.
newest Demon Slayer JJK, and it's like, bro, this shit does not expire. Like the
Right.
JJK episode is gonna be there tomorrow, next year, whenever. Like I feel like, and it's just, and I think it's with a lot of shows, like every single thing that comes out, every single movie, like you need to watch it now. You're gonna get spoiled. You're gonna miss the conversation. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
everybody, relax. This media is not going anywhere. Like you do not have to be up to date on every single anime this season to be an anime fan. But online
Yeah.
is trying to convince people that you have to be.
Yeah. It's there's more media, just in general, just from the past 20 years. There's more media than anybody will ever be able to consume in a lifetime. I feel no qualms about not being up to date on even like regular length anime. Even the like good classic 26 episodes, like I don't feel any qualms about not being up to date on that. You know, I'll get to it when I get to it, and it'll be when I have like a brief hyperfixation that I cannot escape because that's how ADHD works. But it's not gonna be because a teenager bullied me into watching it. I'm not doing it
Yes.
that way. I'm not operating like that.
No, absolutely not. That's no way to live.
Um,
But I feel like then that's what people, they're like, I'm so burned out on anime. I'm anime burnout. And I'm like, that does not exist. You're just making shit up because you have zero self control. Okay, Suki, this is not the time. Sorry, my cat is like, this is the time for me to act out. Um,
Oh yeah, she doesn't
but
like what she's hearing.
she, I don't know, I feel like she knows when I'm recording, and she's like, it's time to start
Mhm.
ripping the carpet. um but yeah,
Yep.
I just think, I think we're, people are doing too much, and like everything does not need to be consumed at this like massive neck braid speed that everyone's trying to make us
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Let me do it at a relaxing pace. I'll get to it when I get to it. You get to it when you
Yes.
get to it. It's fine. You know.
Absolutely. So that actually goes right into what I have you here on the show for, and I'm so excited that you've picked an anime movie to talk about because I don't think I've done a movie episode yet.
Hmm.
Which I'm like, I think a lot of times people don't think about the movies, and I'm a big like anime movie person. So
Yeah.
this ended up being working out so perfectly. So you are here, and you're going to talk about very little well known. Nobody knows this. This is a cult classic. No
Uh-huh.
one's ever heard of this movie before, and that is
Uh-huh.
Princess Mononoke.
Yep.
Arguably, probably one of the best Studio Ghibli films ever. But you're going to be talking about this film, and you are in the expert seat. So you're going to be telling us about this movie and what it's about. So, what is Princess Mononoke?
Okay, so first of all, it's one of the greatest films of all time. Animated or otherwise, it's one of the greatest films of all time. Both English and Japanese voice acting is incredible. The story is incredible, just from start to finish, and just like captures just about every thought that I feel like I've had in the past close to a decade about politics, about people, about just like ecology in general. Don't even know where to start. You want to just talk about the story? We got Ashitaka, one of the last princes of the Amishi tribe, gets cursed by a boar demon, who that is rampaged into his village. Gets a curse mark on his arm, which I believe is like, but yeah, I believe the curse mark is a pretty prominent trope in like Japanese folklore media in general. Sasuke got it, and a bunch of other characters got it, but this is like the earliest version of it that I am familiar with. Uh, Even though it goes back to folklore, but it's the earliest like in anime uh, that I know about it. Forced to leave his village, has to go to the source of this boar's curse, which is to Iron Town, where people are manufacturing iron. It's an iron refinery or whatever that is sort of on the periphery of Empire. Um, it's like sort of an auxiliary vassal state of this. Actually, it's not. It's not a vassal state, but it's sort of on the verge of becoming a vassal state for this empire, for the Mikado or whatever they want to call him. Goes to Irontown, hunts down this woman, Lady Eboshi, to find the source of this iron ball that has put this curse on him. Finds out that she's refining all this iron, trying to develop the forest for the use of humans, um, and in part of that journey involves killing the god of the forest for some reason in just one of the most stupidly explicit expressions of human stupidity I have ever seen in my life on film. Um, who else you got? You got your boy Jigo. You got Sen, who is obviously the Princess Mononoke, the girl who's raised by wolves. Um, the wolves' names I'm blanking on, other than Moro, who is the mother wolf. Do the other two even have names? I don't know. I don't. I just rewatched this movie. I don't know if they even have names. Um,
I can't
but
remember either.
yeah, I have no idea. But maybe I don't need to tell the whole story from start to finish before we start talking about it. Just really
No,
just
it's
trying to convince
okay.
myself that I remember.
I mean, I
But
haven't. I saw they did like a. They usually run it in theaters every year, and I went one of the
yeah,
last times that they showed it, and I've
yeah,
also rewatched it since. But I remember watching it in the theater, and I feel like I was like, I don't remember this movie being as graphic as it is on this big screen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very graphic film. Lot of lot of lot of very funny violence, I would say.
Yes.
Like like very silly looking violence. Um, and a lot of very beautiful, powerful looking violence. You know, it kind of runs the whole gamut.
No, I get it. So, I'm so like every time I think of the last time I saw it, I think of when I saw it in theaters, and I was like, that's the one specific moment. It's very on in the beginning when he's like running by. I don't know who they are. They're like not important people, but he
Yeah.
like grabs their head, like slashes their heads off, and he has them in his hands. And I was like, whoa, like this is so like.
Whoa.
Have I been so out of it that I didn't remember this part? Because I had seen it before then. It was like
Yeah.
right on early in the beginning, and I was like, I think up until then, like the most recent ones I had rewatched had been like Kiki's Delivery Service and Hal's Moving
Right.
Castle, which like obviously have deep themes to them, but I was like not as the
Right.
graphic level as this. So that was pretty jarring.
Yeah. Wait, are you thinking of the moment where he like post curse he like shoots the dude's head off with the arrow? I don't remember him
Maybe.
ever holding somebody's head up
Okay,
like
yes, it was the arrow. It was the.
okay.
Listen, I could be conflating things,
Okay. Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that was
Okay.
jarring. I was like, wow, that's how we're started.
Yeah, and it's like not an important part of the movie.
No, That's
it's
like
it's
very
like
early on.
yeah, it's a little bit of a, I guess, save the cat moment of like establishing that he can do that, but like
Mhm.
it does those people's deaths do not factor into the rest of the story at all.
No. So when do you remember like the first time you saw Princess Mononoke or how you got introduced to the movie?
I definitely saw it as an adult. Um, I believe it was after um, it was after starting at Getting the Robot. So it would have been like 2018 ish. Um, and it was part of my frustration with having to watch a bunch of long ass shows. I was like, let me just know literally one thing all the way through. And then I watched it, and it was just one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. Um, and I think I've watched it like at least a dozen times since then. It's definitely a comfort film at this point. Um, and like just sort of like read and watched other stuff that reinforced how I feel about this film, and just like um, it also feels to me like a pretty defining like political film
Hmm.
for for Miyazaki himself, and just for like me personally. Um, it feels like because I think people's perception of like who Miyazaki is and what he's about, one is sort of colored by like his relationship with his family and people around him,
Hmm.
which in some cases is not particularly good, and then colored by things that he's said overtly about politics that you know are sometimes like, and granted I don't know everything he said, but like just sometimes the thing he says politically feel like either incomplete or like um not fully supported by what he does. And I feel like this film sort of captures like this is what this man was trying to get at throughout his
Hmm.
entire career. Um, for everything that you can say um, about his real life activities and his real life behavior, um, and like the workerism that has driven his sort of his 50-year career. Like this is the thing that sets the sort of the standard out of which everything else grows, if that makes sense.
No, that absolutely makes sense, and it makes me curious about when you watched it because I also watched it as an adult. But were you
Yeah.
also watching other movies of his, or this goes like randomly? You just saw this one movie.
I was watching pretty much everything he put out. I bought a like a Studio Ghibli box set, so it had everything up until like right before like Boy and the Heron came out, I guess. So like The Wind Rises would have been the last thing on it. It also coincided with when HBO got the whole Studio Ghibli um, what's it catalog.
Catalog. Hmm.
Yeah, so I was also watching like the non Miyazaki Studio Ghibli stuff, like the Takahata, like what's it called? Tale of the Princess Kaguya was a big
Hmm.
one at the time. So I was pretty much watching everything, but that was one of the ones that really stood out, I guess. Um, Especially having known about and seen variously like Spirited Away, uh, Nausicaa, and all of these other things. Um, I guess it was also part of like because we when I was working at Crunchyroll on Anime in America, we had a there was a big segment about Nausicaa because this it was the first Ghibli film that they had tried to localize, um, which was Studio Ghibli working with Miramax and by way of Harvey Weinstein to localize Nausicaa, and they cut out like 45 minutes of the movie, changed the title to Warriors of the Wind, tried to adapt it to American kids, and basically it sucked. And so Princess
Hmm.
Mononoke was like, this is the like if this doesn't work, Studio Ghibli is swearing off the West entirely, and never releasing a film here again. And so that was the one that sort of came out like first of all like fully to Miyazaki's vision, and also just like has such a lore behind it, I guess, that I
Hmm.
got really intrigued by it. Obviously, but me not being able to stop talking about it.
No, so
I just
no,
keep
I
saying,
find it we had almost like a very similar trajectory because I had seen like Kiki's Delivery Service and Howl's Moving Castle, but during COVID, I used to do like virtual anime movie nights, and that was right when HBO got the catalog, and I was doing a movie night every single week of the movies all in order.
hmm
So I had seen it in context with Nausicaa and like everything else, and I feel like that really shaped my understanding of the movie,
yeah,
especially compared to like what I had kind of just known previously of it. So that's why I had asked. But you mentioned anime. I mentioned that podcast almost every single podcast episode that I do because
oh
I'm always like, "Did you know?" And then I reference the podcast, and I'm like, "You guys need to go listen to the podcast."
yeah, yeah.
Because it all has all the gems, it has all the facts. It was incredibly well done. Um,
Thank you.
but yeah, Princess Mononoke, I feel like is so. It definitely, I get exactly what you're saying about like the message in it is so like. I think it's very in your face. Like I think it's
Uh-huh.
very like where I feel like Howl's Moving Castle, there is definitely like an anti-war message there, but there's a lot of like romance and like mysticism and like funny, really cute little like things that are happening also at the same time.
Yeah,
Where like Princess Mononoke is kind of like we don't really got moments like that. Like we're going from like this crazy scene to this crazy scene to this crazy scene,
yeah,
and it's so it's definitely one of his movies where I feel like you hear it, like you hear the message that like, and if you're really like. You must be watching with your eyes closed if you're kind of like not understanding the message of the movie.
yeah. Right. And I mean, for my part, like you mentioned, Howl's and Kiki, like those two movies could never really keep my attention, if I'm being honest. Like I feel like because Miyazaki he storyboards and he starts drawing before he has a script, which I feel like is so impressive. But I also do feel like there are moments where I really feel it, and I think Howl's and Kiki's are two of the movies where I really feel it. And if I'm being honest, I feel like I only know about the anti-war messaging of Howl's because I know that he like boycotted the Oscars because of the Iraq War, which was when Howl's came out. Um, but like Princess Mononoke to me, it also happened as I was reading. Hold on, as I was reading this book right here, um, which is the Ecology of Freedom by Murray Bookchin, um, which to me I feel like was it like the parallels between the two things were so strong where I felt like, and I was planning on writing a video essay about this, which is part of why I know so much about it, I guess. But like the parallels were so strong that I went looking for um, any evidence that he had read that this book. Because like I know he went to school. I forget which college. I know he went to the same university as what is the guy's name, uh the like crazy Japanese fascist dude,
Oh my god.
Mishima or whatever his name. I'm blanking on the name, but I'm sure somebody in the comments will know who I'm talking about.
Was he a
But
dictator?
no, he was just a writer.
Let's
Right.
see.
Yukio Mishi, is that right? Um,
Yukio Mishima.
yeah. That's the
I
one.
googled crazy Japanese fascist writer.
Yep, yep. There it is. But I know he went to the same university as him and studied Marxist economy and all this stuff. Um, like is this is why I say his politics come off as like incomplete in some ways. Is like he's quoted as saying Marxism was a mistake. He also said anime was a mistake, which um, and like Nausicaa is sort of the like it sort of branches off in two directions based on when the film was made versus when the manga was made. The film is a lot more hopeful in a sense. It sort of has this like this Christ figure. If you've seen Mickey 17, it's the same movie. Or like Christ figure rises after sacrificing himself, and then everything is good, and nobody suffers ever again. Whereas the Nausicaa manga is like, here's Miyazaki dealing with the fall of Yugoslavia and the like balkanization of Soviet Russia, and like watching the dream of communism die in Eastern Europe, basically. And he sort of descends into this sense that like humanity is stupid and we'll never be able to overcome our stupidity, and we'll constantly be at war, and we'll never do the right thing, if that makes sense. And then after that comes Princess Mononoke, where I think he's sort of gotten over the grief, or at least like come to terms with some elements of it, and sort of gotten into the deeper pieces of it, which is like and again, I don't think that he's ever touched on this stuff like in his actual I don't think he's ever verbalized this stuff.
Right.
But this is where he's starting to touch on like these are the deeper parts of like human nature that that like our attempts to build new worlds have not really contended with. Like the fact of Soviet Russia being still sort of a hierarchical society, and ultimately being a capitalist society, like ultimately just being modeled after like this is a foil of capitalism as opposed to this is a new world in a sense, which is why I think it's so important that like Ashitaka has this moral clarity that where he's so clear in what he needs to do and what he thinks needs to be done that it doesn't make sense to the other people in the film. To where you have the people in Irontown not understanding what side he's on. You have Sen thinking he's fighting for the humans. You have the people in Irontown thinking he's fighting for the wolves, when the reality is he's just like that phrase, "I want to see with eyes unclouded," is like it. I feel like it should be so clear to anybody who's outside looking in that he's not on the side of either group in this scenario. He's carving out a new path that neither side is really thinking of, which is to break this curse of violence that has been inflicted upon him as somebody who comes from this indigenous society, rather than like perpetuating this war that if you don't really examine it, you would think is the point of this film. Yeah, and there's more to it, but I'll.
Sorry, this cat is.
Oh, hello,
there's a
Mandy.
door next to me, and she's like, "This is the time to scratch the door." No, I definitely think that it's one of those things where, and I think as human nature, like we're conditioned that you do have to pick a side, right? Like it's either you're with them, you're against them. Like there's never a third. What's that meme? That's like it's actually a third secret thing, but it really is. Like it is that thing where he's like, actually, neither of these options are correct or right, or there's like merit in both sides. And it's like, but neither of them going all in on one way or going all in on another way just isn't the way that I want to do things and the way that I want to like break free from these circumstances that I'm currently in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I think the fact of the matter to Ashitaka's mind is like the violent piece of this is inevitable, but I'm not for it in a sense. Like I think a lot of people tend to fetishize the violent part of revolution, for example, and they say like, I want to go guns a blazing and all this stuff, and like they talk about beating up cops, and they talk about uh, getting a gun and going up against the military and
Yes.
all this stuff. When like, you know, a lot of Black Panthers will say that's the part that fucked us up is that we went in too heavy on that part. Um, and you can speak to how much the feds were involved in pushing them in that direction, but like that we went too heavy on that part and we sort of lost sight of the organizational piece of it, you know. And I feel like Ashitaka is focused on the organizational piece of it, which ultimately is what happens at the end when we get to we're gonna rebuild Irontown and we're gonna rebuild it better. You know, I think that's ultimately the vision that he doesn't have from the beginning, but I think that he's pushing toward for the entire film, whereas everybody else is sort of deviating in these other directions of like, Sen kind of just wants to kill humans for some reason, and Lady Eboshi just wants to kill the forest spirit for some reason, which why? Whereas
Girl, what you doing?
exactly. Whereas Ashitaka has been forced out of his home because of this conflict and just wants to like and knows he can't go back, and all he knows is like I need to rebuild a home for myself and for the people around me. Which is how the film ultimately has to end.
Yeah. And I think it's also like refreshing my memory of it. But it like he's up and throughout the movie, like he arrives in Irontown and is like immediately taken in by them, and it's like, okay, so this is how you live. And then when he does go into the forest and he's with San, like then he's also like, oh, here's also how you live. Like he's able to navigate both of the worlds and see the humanity or the part of them that is like worth being here. And that's why he can't pick a side. And like San is so hurt and everything with the humans, and of course she, as being with the spirits and like being with all the animals, sees the like evilness of that, and she can't let go of that because that's not her experience to it. So then he's this perfect person where it's like, okay, yes, they're doing bad things, but there's also good here.
Yeah, I'm realizing I said Sen a bunch of times. That's Chihiro from Spirited Away. This is San. But yeah, yeah, and I think it's also important, like that San sort of has to be reminded that she's human on multiple occasions, because, and which is I don't know if even Miyazaki understands how genius this film is, where like, a lot of recent human history is sort of trying to project like, or trying to get to the bottom of like what human nature is, and sort of going off these two separate models of, you got Thomas Hobbes, you got Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Thomas Hobbes says humans are inherently evil, and the only way to suppress that evil is to have government over us, and in his mind, like a philosopher king or whatever the fuck. Whereas Jean-Jacques Rousseau is proposes this idea of like humanity is inherently good, and as we develop society, we sort of sprint. He says we run toward our chains, whereas so that the more society develops, the less freedom we have. But that's just a necessity of being human, or being in human society and having this social contract. And San keeps projecting this idea of like humans are evil. I want to kill all humans. I want to do all this stuff, and has to be reminded that like you're a human too. If you say all this stuff about human nature, you have to. It also implies something about yourself. You're not special just because you grew up with these wolves. Just because you see a different, because you view yourself differently. because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that's fucked up. Is like, and that's where this sort of like vanguardist ideal that comes from like that people pull out of Marxism that wasn't necessarily there. Um, where like people project themselves as this elite that's separate from the masses, and that
Right.
I have to be the one to lead you to revolution. You know, it's this egotistical thing. Um, you know, and she has to be brought down to earth and reminded like you are one of the people. You are one of these people, and ultimately, like I know she like ends up, uh, I guess, going back to the forest in the end, but like that's the lesson I think to take away from for her part. Um, yeah, I had a second piece to that, but I don't remember what it is.
Well,
So.
we'll come back to you. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think, but that kind of does give us off to a great point because this movie has been in the culture for a long time, and I definitely think it's one of those movies that unfortunately but fortunately like can apply to any piece of time, whatever current living history that we're like, it's applicable, like just
Yeah.
swap in whatever groups, it's definitely applicable. But having this be have been in the conversation for as long as it has, if you see conversations surrounding this movie, what is something about this movie that you think people don't understand or have the wrong idea about, like the message of this movie?
I think this was the second part, which was which is
See,
that
it
Lady,
happened.
yeah, which is that Lady Eboshi is a villain. She is a villain. I see all these video essays and like posts about this movie where people are like, "Well, is Lady Eboshi actually a good guy? She's a villain." I think it's a very rare moment in Miyazaki where where there's clarity in who the villain is. She's a bad person, you know. Um, she does a lot of bad shit. I'll say that. Um I won't relegate her to the territory of bad person because she does come around in the end and learns a lesson and like actually like reforms personality. But all the things that people cite about her as evidence of her being a benevolent person or whatever are bad things to me. Like, first of all, we have this narrative about her like hiring a bunch of women to work in the bellows of this iron refinery when like I don't believe that giving people labor is a benevolent act. You know, a bene- I think it's more evident when it comes to like the lepers that she hires. These people who are literally in bandages, and she has them like making guns small enough for women to carry and all this stuff. Like, it's not a benevolent act to give sick people labor. It's a benevolent act to give them help and care. You know, we have this weird idea because we project modern ideals onto every fucking facet of history. Um, that that humanity is somehow rooted in like having wage labor for someone else. You know, like like Steve Jobs gave a bunch of people work, that, and
Yay!
he also employs or he also like uses slave labor in the fucking Congo. That's not a good thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she brings them wine or sake, depending on which translation you watch, like um, to apologize for their day being so long, that's not a benevolent thing. That's just somebody masking their cruelty, you know. Just that she's engineering these guns to be small enough for women to carry. She just is building an army of former sex workers, you know, to ultimately go and destroy the ecology still. It's like we have this idea that, because the empire, because the Japanese imperial army is off in the distance antagonizing these people, that somehow makes them that somehow necessarily makes them good people, you know. Um, that because you're in conflict with bad people that you're a good person. And this to me is like a version of like the rapid industrialization of China or any of these like so-called communist countries that ultimately idealizing industrialization as a way of lifting people out of poverty at the expense of the ecology around them. You know, you have Lady Eboshi literally like taking this gun from this leper that she's hired and going out and like shooting apes with it to clear them out so that she can develop the forest and keep them stupid. You know,
But
it's like
she's doing it for women.
she's doing
Women's
it
rights.
for yeah, yeah. Shout out girl power. Like
Girl
it's
boss. Hashtag
girl
girl
boss.
boss.
It you know what it is? It's this. It's and this is why I say it's such a good pair. If you have the time, Ecology of Freedom is a book that's so worth reading. Um, and for like modern, I guess, adaptations of it, Abdullah Erdogan is a good person to read. Um, if you've like seen what's going on in Syria right now, like a lot of that whole movement is grounded in a lot of his writing. But it sort of captures the idea that there was I'm getting very esoteric and going back too far, but basically that there was a rupture between sort of, it's a little bit reductive, but a masculine and a feminine way of social organizing in the Neolithic era, and the masculine being this sort of constant accumulation and like science as the only way of knowing things, um, and projecting power over other people, whereas the feminine is the sort of the caring and the child rearing and all of these things, which before this rupture happened there was no sort of pretense about like which one of those was more valuable than the other. People were wary of this accumulation, and uh, and you know, in some societies maybe women were more commonly in this position of child rearing, but there was no pretense that one was more important than the other until the rupture happens and the people who do the accumulating, like after the agricultural revolution or like around, it took like 3,000 years, so it's not like a causal thing, but like after that happens, you start to see this stratification based on gender. And what Lady Eboshi represents to me is sort of trying to recapture and bridge that gap, but just putting a female face on top of this sort of masculine accumulation ethic, you know, um, which I think the same thing applies to like, you know, in the U.S. context, like this idea that a woman president is somehow going to solve everything without actually addressing the underlying economic and political substance of the situation, um, or like looking at like these like communist countries that gain all this social capital just by having democratic or people's or republic in their name without being
Hmm.
substantially different from the United States. I think that's what Lady Eboshi represents to me, is a lot of y'all's willingness to capitulate to somebody's public persona or public reputation or perception purely based on what they say they are. I think that's what Lady Eboshi represents to me. It's not this significant departure from anything else that we're used to. It's just that she's being attacked by a power that's further along in the same process. That's all it is.
Listen, I get it. It makes sense. I didn't
Sorry, it was a lot
know
of
no, actually you've taught me so much. Um and I didn't know that people like were debating her goodness. I was like, girl, did you not see her in that like with the spirit beast, and she like shoots it like the forest spirit, and I'm like, you walk away from that thinking like Yeah, she's giving people wine and people work for her that probably wouldn't
Yeah.
work otherwise. And like where have why are those the bare minimums that we need? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't take much to impress people, you know?
mhm.
And we've managed to justify that type of stuff throughout history. Part of the is it part of the Hobbes? Part of the like broader sort of enlightenment ethic is separating humanity from nature and projecting nature as something that we now need to conquer as opposed to something that we need to be in harmony with, which is I think part of what Lady Eboshi represents is the sort of is that ideal of human progress, is that the more that we conquer nature, the better off we are, you know. So I'm sure there are people that look at it that way and say like, well, she's doing what we're supposed to be doing as humans. Like, you don't have to accept that narrative.
Right. And that is like what he does. He's like, actually, I don't think this is the best path. But that leads me then to this other, which maybe this answered it too, but you have all of these thoughts about this movie, but is there something that you took away from it that you don't think other people agree with you about?
Um, well, I don't know because I have heard a lot of people say this. I've heard people say this stuff about Lady Eboshi. That's the most frequent thing that I've heard that I disagree with. I think the main thing that I get from this movie, it's not necessarily a thing about the film itself, but more about Miyazaki's like personal ethics. What I think people tend to view him as an environmentalist,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I and both I and a lot of the people that I've read and talked to this about believe that is a reductive term. Um, so um, where the environment is sort of like a thing that's separate from you and a thing that you sort of preserve just so it looks nice and people have a place to visit when they want to get away. You have it's like the national park thing, where you can like go for a hike, and like pay the government to see some trees or whatever. Whereas ecology and this book, Ecology of Freedom, is about social ecology, which is that like all of our problems with the ecology are rooted in problems with our sociality, problems with the way that we relate to each other socially, you know. So you have like um, on the very like broad vulgar side, like you have obviously this war is what brings Ashitaka into Irontown in the first place, but it's a broader thing about the way that we organize society in that sort of masculine um, that masculine ethic, which is sort of rooted in and I think it's important that Ashitaka comes from this indigenous society because because um, this book sort of illustrates a model of how we came to from like a shamanistic indigenous society into an authoritarian like militaristic society like Irontown or like the Empire. Um, and it has to do with these shamans sort of projecting themselves to be more in tune with nature than everyone else, and so they have authority over like over communing with nature, and so they're the ones that like say what the weather is gonna be. I mean, they're like imagine like a weatherman, but you have access to him and you can kill him, if the weather is not what you say it is, which means the harvest is fucked up, which means your society doesn't last. And so because of that dynamic, these people have to like gather what you call it, like little cadres of young men who gain social capital from being around them as shamans, and then they gain the protection from these young men in case the people decide to revolt because the harvest was fucked up because they predicted the weather wrong. And so you have this militaristic society being built at a very small scale purely because these old men want to preserve their social status because old people are generally the first to get left behind when shit gets hard, you know, which is how we get to our modern society of like gerontocracy and the rule of the old big Republicans, all this stuff, from that little cellular change in indigenous society. So I think and I know I said a lot, but I think that difference between like the environment as something to look at versus ecology as something to live in and be a part of and to affect change upon, I think that's the difference between what people tend to perceive about Miyazaki versus what he's actually projecting, whether he says those things out loud or not. So it's less about the movie itself and more about like his broader ethic. Which is why I was trying so hard to see if he'd read this book. And the closest,
just ask him. Just
yeah,
get in contact with him.
yeah, I wish I had an email address or something. I did find a guy that I could confirmed. I think that he read this guy named Sasuke Nakao, who's like an ethnobotanist, but most of his work is in Japanese, and I couldn't dig much further than that at the time. But but if anybody can confirm, that would be great. I would love that.
Yeah, it's interesting too because he also has. I'm reminded of Castle in the Sky, which
Yeah,
also has kind of like those like nature and like all these
yeah,
advancements from the military and like we're hurting the natural world and I do have seen many posts of like the environment yay and like in Howl's,
yeah,
which is funny because Howl's Moving Castle is based on a book that Miyazaki did not write.
yeah,
And they're like he's like anti-war and like preserving all of these nature things and it's like okay but what is there, like what is
yeah,
actually there versus like what we're projecting. I also think sometimes with like older people we're like they're just so good and like we project the kind of like all these morals and like what we kind of wish that they stand for
yeah.
onto them in a
Mm-hmm.
way where we're like are you actually like you haven't specifically said this and all art is political but at the same time too like what is there versus what we're projecting onto the art itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm doing a lot of projecting right now because, but yeah, yeah, and we have these ideas about like um, about older people that are sort of like based on what I was just saying is like they sort of want you to believe um, that they think all these things, or they want you to believe that they are sort of the authority on um, what broader society thinks or should think. And like they're the keepers of knowledge and all this stuff, which you notice Ashitaka is the youngest person in the village that he leaves, aside from his sister, I guess. Um, but yeah, like like I think it's pretty important that he meets with these village elders before he is forced to leave his village and never come back. You know, um, and even the fact that like it's tradition um, that he has to like cut his hair off and he can't look back. Or it forbids them from watching him leave and all this stuff. Like, you know, it does make you wonder, like, well, why do you have to do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why can't you? Why can't you just like be normal and
Look,
not to like not to sort of shit on like what is portrayed as an indigenous tradition in this context, but like it does make you ask that question of just like when it's in the context of like these village elders and all this stuff, it makes you wonder like, well, why can't you do this stuff? You know?
Hmm.
Um,
It's very interesting because I am reading, I'm super into Danmei, which is like Chinese BL.
uh-huh.
But I'm reading this story that has a lot of like Chinese ancient lore. And then
Hmm.
there's like specifically like a tribe of like the shaman, and the shaman are supposed to be like these all wise, like these all wise elders. So like everything that you're saying is just so tying. I'm like, well, now that the pieces are put together, because then there
Yeah.
is like this community of like, and they're not quite humans. Like they didn't have beef with the humans, but they didn't have beef with the demons. But they kind of were
Uh-huh.
like in the middle, but they never chose the side. But then as
Uh-huh.
a result, like they start getting targeted, and then like all the village elders, I think they like die or something, and then like this young person takes over, but like he doesn't have the knowledge of the old people. And I'm like, what you're
Yeah.
saying makes so much sense in
Yeah.
the context of something else, but like it definitely, now I'm like, now you're like opening that third eye, and I'm like, well, now that I think about it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's like, where did all these things come from?
Yeah, right, right. And it really makes you wonder. I feel like that's why I love this film so much. Is like it's like it's not even so much that he he made it so clear what his politics are, and he painted such a clear picture. It's that he he left such a perfect canvas to like ultimately project what my values are onto this thing. You know, I feel like in my head there's such like clarity um, in it where I'm like like fuck, I see everything. You know,
Hmm.
it feels like I'm looking at the Matrix code. Like,
You've unlocked. Well, I mean, that does get into my question about the movie. Like what legacy do you think it's leaving behind, or what what has it done, and how has it shaped like what has come after it?
I mean, I think that's a it's kind of the same question, but it's kind of different because I think everything I just said is not necessarily what I think everyone else has gotten from it. Ultimately, I don't know what everybody else has gotten from it. Because unfortunately, I tend to think like anime audiences, and granted, Miyazaki is a little bit dismissive of like anime as a genre, so like I don't even know how much anime audiences really give a shit about this movie, but but for the ones that do, I feel like they tend to like flatten things and um, try to remove messaging from things that they like, and I do feel like it's willful ignorance in a lot of ways. Where like I remember putting out an essay about Attack on Titan, and half the comments were like, "Bro, it's not that deep. It's not that serious. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just a cartoon, bro." And I feel like that was 5 or 6 years ago. And I can only imagine it's gotten worse since then
Yes.
as we've gotten into territory where like you got black and brown people running white supremacist organizations very explicitly and praising Hitler and doing weird shit like that. So I as much as I want to believe everybody's getting what I got from it, I highly doubt. Which is why I wanted to write this essay in the first place. Is that I highly doubt the majority of people are getting that type of messaging from this film. Um, when I personally believe that like maybe this is maybe this is ego talking or maybe this is just whatever, but I feel like if I outlined to Miyazaki everything I just said, I feel like he would be inclined to be like, "Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I
Actually,
meant.
you saw right through
Yeah,
me, and
yeah, you got
this was me.
it." Like, I do feel like that's partly ego, but I feel like it can't be a coincidence that it lines up um, so perfectly in that way. You know.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I really don't know. I hope they got what I got, but
No, I
hope it
get, I
happens.
get it. I get it because one of my biggest annoyances and grievances is that it's not that deep. Because I'm like, if you got a smooth brain, just say that. Like, if you
Yeah.
cannot think further than messages that are directly stated to you, and even then, they're not getting the messages that are directly stated to them because I see some of the hot takes and the essays and the videos, and I'm like, we're not watching the same thing. Like that was
Yeah.
explicitly stated. So I get that, and I think with this, I find that like and this is probably my ego talking, right? But like when I think of anime, like I don't think of anime as like anime and like everything that in a vacuum of anime. Like when I list my favorite movies, there's animated movies, and because to me, it's not that different than like a live action Leo movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But when I think about Princess Mononoke and like the legacy that I think that it leaves behind, I think it is such like that cliche saying of like history repeats itself. Like this is such a time, this movie was created in the 80s, and it's like take out, the stylistic styling of the 80s, and it's like this movie could apply to today. This movie could apply to 10 years ago. This movie could apply 50, 60, 70 years ago. And it's just like a capsule of the human condition to me of like, whether intentional, whether, not, like you said.
Yeah.
And now having all this context that you've provided of things that I didn't even know about, I didn't even think about. It's kind of just like, wow, we are just on a loop. Like, I forget what it's called, that theory that we're just like in a circle.
Hmm.
But it's like that's what that I feel like this movie, and whether intentional or not, I feel like a lot of Miyazaki films, those earlier ones really were just like a portal to that time of
Yeah.
like, and it's like, wow, that time is evanescent. Like the battles that we're fighting today are so clearly depicted in this movie that it's like
Yeah.
watching it now and having this conversation now doesn't feel dated or anything at all.
Yeah, I agree, and it feels like that's part of the point is like it um, projects this sort of rupture from the past and how it affects today. Um, it's like just like shooting an arrow through the forest. It's like it's not gonna deviate in all these different ways. Just it's gonna hit. You know, it's gonna go in a straight line, and I feel like
Hmm.
that's sort of what Ashitaka's story is doing. Is it's going in a straight line regardless of all the little shit along the way. You know, it feels like you have this pretty clear conflict of like, this is where we were, this is where we're at. We can't go back to this, and we know that this is not the way to be. So, as much as it fucking sucks, we gotta make the next thing. You
Hmm.
know, we gotta look forward. And I know the people that were doing this thing may have sucked, you know, um, but they're still around, and either you gotta kill them or you gotta bring them into the next thing. you
Right.
know, that's like I'm rereading Pedagogy of the Oppressed right now, and a big part of it is like, you know, there's this sort of um, there's this tension between the oppressor and the oppressed, and the only way to resolve that tension is to rehumanize both of those parties. And I think that's, the importance of Lady Eboshi is that, I wouldn't say she's necessarily an oppressor per se, because I think you have to perceive somebody as an oppressor, and clearly a lot of people don't see her that way.
Hmm.
But I do think that's what she represents, is sort of that reconciliation of the oppressor oppressed dichotomy, you know, that she ultimately at the end sees what she did wrong, and uh and they decide to rebuild something better toward the end, you know. Or you could argue that it's a praxis thing, and she's just sort of, what's the word, reflecting on the mistakes of what you could call a revolutionary project,
Hmm.
you know, and reflecting on the fact that, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have killed the forest spirit like a fucking
Now that
idiot.
I lost my arm and I don't have this
Yeah,
arm now. Like that was
yeah.
I shouldn't have done that.
Maybe
Oops.
maybe it was a bad idea to kill the forester and turn it over to a fucking weirdo merchant. Um, yeah, I think you can make either of those arguments that maybe she is a revolutionary figure, but she's now forced to reflect on the mistakes, which I think a lot of people don't want to do. A lot of
Hmm.
people want to sort of freeze these things in time and say like, oh, we have to go back to this thing that they suppressed, um, forgetting that the thing that was suppressed still had its own pitfalls along the way. You know.
Yeah. We was romanticized like back in this people doing this and it's like, well, there's
Yeah.
other like there's yeah, I get that. And I think that important pieces of like the journey at the end, it's like the willingness to reflect and to realize that like and then it's like are people too far gone, like this is always the argument about redemption, like is everyone redeemable, like is
Yeah.
everyone able to redeem themselves and move forward then with the community and then realize where not only realize where they were wrong but then commit then to moving forward in that new direction. And it's like there's a disconnect there of like, okay, are we moving forward? Have you actually really repented? How can we be sure that these same mistakes aren't going to be made again?
Right. Right. And again, it's like you gotta either kill them or you gotta acknowledge that they're there. You know,
Like, you did this
like
fucked up shit, but welcome
yeah,
back.
yeah. It's like I um I was just reading. Sorry to keep bringing up new readings, but
No, please. I
there's a letter.
love books.
Yeah. This was a letter. It was and maybe it was in a book. I'm losing track of where everything is coming from, but from the Zapatistas, Subcomandante Marcos, who was like their sort of spokesperson for a long time, um, had a line about someone who had either killed or attempted to kill some of their people, and that he now has to deal with the burden of having been forgiven.
Oof.
You know, like we're not gonna just wage war on this person in perpetuity because he did something wrong. He has to now deal with like, you got to live with this guilt for the rest of your life. You know, and you can argue about whether you think that's effective, but like I think it's an important thing to consider.
Mm-hmm.
In certain cases, it's just like I don't know. The mind can do a lot.
Yeah.
The mind is capable of a lot. Um, but yeah, that line just really stuck with me, and I feel
Ooh,
like
that definitely that hit that hit hard. Like,
yeah,
yeah, because you do think of that, and it's like, it makes me think of when people are like, oh, white guilt and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, yes, actually, like you
hmm
should move forward thinking because of the stuff that has happened before. Um,
hmm
it's all applicable. But no, I appreciate all the insight that you have brought to this conversation because I feel like I'm so tired of the it's not that deep, it's not this. It's like, listen, all art is political. I mean, there's people arguing that like Luffy would be on ISIS side or something. Like
oh,
so I
crazy.
like this the shit is going over people's head, but I definitely think this is such a timely and important conversation. This is such a great movie. I also love this movie too. Now I'm like, damn, I gotta rewatch it now with this new knowledge of ecology,
Yeah.
because I'm like a new portal has been unlocked. But for those listening, I'll be sure to put all the books that you mentioned in the description because I do know a lot of people who listen are like me and are like, actually, let's start looking that up. Let's start
Yeah.
getting this additional information. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking
hmm
about this movie and just bringing all these amazing perspectives. And I want to have you let us know what projects you have coming up. What can we look forward to? Where should we be like looking out for you?
the only thing I got coming up is February 24th. I'm dropping a stand-up special. It's gonna be on my YouTube page. I'll be posting all over the place about it. If you're in New York, I'll be doing a little watch party. TBA, to be announced. That's pretty much it. That's all I got. You know.
Yeah, well, I'll be sure to link all that in the description of this episode. I have seen Yedoye live. His comedy is very good. And I saw you at Anime NYC too when you did it for the anime comedy night. I also saw
Oh
you on
yeah.
there. So yeah, like you've been out here, and I think I'm very excited for people to, it's funny because I didn't know that you were doing stand up like comedy before you were doing the anime. So
Oh yeah.
that's like a new lore. I thought you kind of got into comedy later. So no, that's funny that like comedy is your main thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's been, I guess I was doing it for like 6 or 7 years before I did any anime stuff. Yeah, that's the main shit.
Well,
Main.
and I think I've had your friend Kyle on here.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yep, he's been on here. He did Dragon Ball Z.
Hmm.
So
Of
he was
course he
that.
did.
Yes, it comes full circle. So thank you so much for coming on. And if you've been listening to this episode, be sure to comment along on YouTube. If you have any questions, get them to Yedoye because I do not have the smarts, the genius to go to answer the questions. But I'm sure he got more information, and I hope you do write that essay on
I,
Princess
I,
Mononoke.
I
Now,
hope
now
to.
the information's here, so now people got to hold you to it.
I mean, the information's here, so that's everything I was gonna say in it. but
Just refer them to
but
this episode.
yeah, yeah.